All right, I think we're live. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this very strange Wednesday in March. And thank you, Gray, for joining me as well. I know a lot of us are working from home. I know you are, Gray, and I'm as well, given everything that's going on out there in the world. So I guess what we're shooting for today is an inspirational talk that'll educate our audience and just kind of break up the day. And I know you've got a lot of good stuff to share, so I'm looking forward to this myself. Before we dive in, I just want to share a few details and introduce myself. My name is Portia Roberts. I'm head of marketing for Synaptiq. I've worked in a lot of different industries in the emerging tech space, from blockchain to cybersecurity, and right now it's my pleasure to be working with Synaptiq in this sort of data and AI services that we're providing. In terms of the webinar, just quick details before we introduce you, Gray. This webinar is being recorded, so for those of you who enjoy it and want to share it with your colleagues, please do so. We encourage you to. There are some attachments on this webinar. One of them is a case study about Farm Journal and what we did with them. So I encourage you to download that and share it. There's also some information about Synaptiq available for you there if you're new to us and you want to learn more. And finally, we are doing this as a live Q&A. So if you have burning questions that you want to ask Gray or me, just go ahead and shoot them into the Bright Talk chat, and we'll get to them probably toward the end of this talk. And that's about it for my list. So with me today is Gray Montgomery, who is with Farm Journal, and I'm going to let him give you his background and a little bit more about himself before we get started.
Thank you so much, Portia. It's great to be here. Yeah, I've been with Farm Journal now for about 2 years, leading the data and research division for Farm Journal. Farm Journal actually is, largely a media company. Part of what I'm trying to help them through is figuring out how to, create a new business model ultimately for the company. Before that, I had been with Winsight, which was a similar business information company serving the consumer food industry. So we covered restaurants, retail, grocery, convenience, things like that. They're also started kind of more in the media operations, and then moved over and helped them. Ultimately became chief innovation officer for their research operation, helping them develop big data products for that company. This has been a really cool opportunity to enter into agriculture. Agriculture is going through like this kind of profound big data moment. Where you now have sensors all over the farm that allow for really capabilities we couldn't imagine before, both for the benefit of the farmer to help their agronomic practices and their business practices, but also to provide kinds of intelligence for the industry that previously would have been unimaginable. Ultimately, Farm Journal was founded on the notion of really serving two customers. One was the farmer, helping the farmer perform at his or her best every day, both in terms of helping them understand agronomy best practices, how to grow stuff better, and then also helping our business clients. So, companies like John Deere or Bayer Monsanto or Pioneer, and ultimately help them figure out how to best reach those farmers and how to develop the best partnerships with farmers. And so you can imagine we're moving from a world for Farm Journal where the answers to those in the old world, in the 20th century world, was we write a story, we provide that story to a farmer, and makes the farmer smarter. In this world, increasingly we expect farmers will be seeking to take their data and compare it against peer sets to make smarter decisions. And so that means things like the future of AgWeb, which is our digital media site, has to change, from serving just articles to serving data sets to help farmers be more intelligent. And for what used to be advertising, we would provide display ads to farmers who would be most apt to buy a product. Well, now we need to help provide intelligence to those about who are the farmers that are most likely to want to transact with them based on a whole variety of practices that are taking place on the farm. Ultimately, we can, make marketing and advertising, a much better experience, much more target experience, both for the farmer as well as for the client. So I kind of serve that role where I'm helping, transform what, was a media model into something else. And Synaptiq's been a great partner and, helped me kind of figure out a way in doing that.
Excellent. So, I mean, I think now is sort of a timely moment for a discussion like this, right? Because a lot of companies and a lot of business leaders are thinking about how different things are, right? With this connected world and digital media being available and everything. And I want to dig into that a little bit more with you. But I first want to just make sure that the audience understands kind of the project that we embarked on together. So Synaptiq being a AI and data strategy, data engineering services provider. Can you describe the project that we embarked on together about a year ago and kind of what we've been doing in partnership?
Yeah. So after I, took the job about 2 years ago, I kind of embarked on a process that went about 3 to 6 months, where I tried to figure out what I would do with Farm Journal, what that vision was. What I just said I didn't exactly have when I first took the job. And so ultimately, yeah, that was kind of the vision statement. In a near term, what I wanted to do is I'd been a part of companies who took their data and provided it and provided it in a front end to clients, and then was served basically on a SaaS business model. And so I sort of viewed that as like, well, Farm Journal has this really nice data set. We actually have data on 1.6 of the 2 million farms in America. Things such as how many acres are on each of those farms, and do they plan on buying a tractor the next year, stuff like that. So that we wanted to be able to provide in a better form factor, hopefully in some sort of, as I described, a SaaS licensed based product. So it's kind of started with that big vision, but then was sort of struggling with how to do that. I mean, there was no real technical development capabilities within Farm Journal. It's basically a media company, and I ultimately, what the guy who is the head of our data science team had some, I think, interaction with Synaptiq and recommended that we take a look at them. And so we went through a process where we ultimately talked to a lot of different kind of vendor partners for both front end and back end development, and told them our story and kind of what the big vision was. And I mean, I was ultimately just sort of impressed that I felt like that Synaptiq was going to probably deal with it. Two things I think really stood out, or when I was going through the process of thinking it through. One was that they were, I felt like, the most technically sophisticated of the firms that we talked with. And really thought about how we could go beyond just sort of solving today's problem, but also as new data streams come in, how they could, build an infrastructure for us to help us, best ingest those as efficiently as possible, so we could scale those businesses up quick. And they also, I think understood very well, the business side of it, and helped me, sort of, that continues on today, literally, kind of helped me. With making the case for what are ultimately significant capex spends, and businesses like media businesses are not used to making major investments and things like this. And so I think kind of helping build business cases has also been very helpful for me.
So just to kind of reiterate what you said, it sounds like, and I'm not one of the folks on the deep technical bench, right? My role is marketing and helping share these stories, but it sounds to me like what the partnership was that Synaptiq provided the deep bench of like technical expertise, data engineers who understand and whose job it is to understand the data. And you at Farm Journal, which obviously sounds like your R&D team has some technical expertise, some data science, and we can get more into that. But you guys were really focused on the business of Farm Journal, right? And that was kind of the synergy. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
Yeah, no, that's right. But I also think that I mean, there's the one thing I'd emphasize in that, what you just said, is that it's one thing to have like, a good vision, and it's also another, sort of, you also have to have partners who can kind of help you with the selling up. And, Stephen in particular, sort of his background in bigger.
Stephen's our the CEO and co-founder of Synaptiq. For those of you who are not familiar with us as much as Gray is.
So he has had good experiences with dealing with both very newer businesses who have leadership and investors who understand this technology. He's also been with those that don't as much, and candidly, Farm Journal is more of an old school media company, and so I think he's also been very helpful for us in sort of kind of framing up the business case, as well as also thinking about how to manage risk, how to sort of smallify things as much as possible, so that we can prove value as quickly. So I mean, there's a big part when you're in my role where you're responsible for a division where you have to figure out how to create the right political dance, and he's good with helping me with that too.
Excellent. Stephen is he's definitely a great partner for strategizing and bouncing ideas. I'm always amazed when I sit in on calls and I listen to the way he actively listens to our clients and our partners, and can help them kind of work through some of the stuff that they're trying to do, not just from a technical perspective, which I mean, we have a whole team that does that, but also just from politics and an upselling perspective. He's sort of a magician that way. So I guess where would you say, like, you derive? I mean, you came into this media company, right? And a media company that's been around for 180 years, is that right?
140. 140. Long time.
So what was that kernel that kind of sparked the vision, right? Like, what was that little idea that you got that told you that there was data sitting there that could be used in a different way, and could potentially, I guess, I mean, what you're saying is really transform the way that you guys are going to market and what you're offering the agriculture market.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I guess I would emphasize about the way we're looking at this is that we have a nice data set, and there are definitely some things that are unique about it. We sit on a lot of behavioral data, for example, that's very, very marketable. But I actually tend to and this is where a company like Synaptiq's helpful, because you have to think about how you scale this stuff. Is that I tend to believe that the cool potential for Farm Journal, or its really unique thing, is actually the ownership of AgWeb, which is just an agriculture news website that's large, whose our audience is largely farmers. So there's this whole vast world, this big ecosystem of ag data startups that are developing now, and they're doing stuff with data and with technology that Farm Journal's not going to do. It's not in our wheelhouse. But what we do have is the capability of reaching like most of the farmers in America every day. And so, something that I've thought about is actually been thinking about, how do we go beyond just the data we have into actually accessing data we don't have and building like a real platform for agriculture data. And so we've actually been, one of the challenges I think for, the Synaptiq team in this is we've been actually asking the question of not just, how do we sort of build a better architecture, more flexible architecture around the data we have, but how would we take in other kinds of data? And so we're in the midst also of creating partnerships with other agriculture data companies. And the trade is basically, we'll help take you big. We'll help you get to that audience that you need to get that large installed base. And in return, we want to have, a share of the data rights. And so the big vision here is not so much that we're going to be, making a big business just strictly off the data that we ourselves are creating, but also, sort of bringing in a lot of other data sets and building intelligence off of all those data sets, because our real advantage is that we have access to a lot of farmers.
So pitch me the product. I have like helped you write the case study. I've been hearing about this project. I want you to like kind of pitch the product for the audience, because I think when you're close to it and you're describing it, it's really clear, but for
Sure.
those of us who are like new to it and are just hearing about it
Yeah.
for the first time, what is this thing that we're building?
Okay, so the simplest form, sort of the phase one of it right now is just a tool that you can go in and query. It warehouses all the farms that we collect data on. So most of the 2 million, 1.6 of the 2 million, and you could query by just show me corn farmers, and it'll show you like, okay, here are the 800,000 corn farmers, and here are a bunch of characteristics of them. This is, the distribution of farm income.
Mhm.
20%, make this amount of money or more, and et cetera, et cetera. This is the distribution of them who use Pioneer versus Syngenta seed, et cetera, et cetera. So it shows you basically distributions of all the different kinds of data we provide across all the farms we're collecting data on. So it's in its current form, an intelligence tool of largely, I guess, what you'd call almost like directory data about farms, as well as behavioral data that we're ingesting from our web properties. In the long term, though, you could imagine it collecting other kinds of intelligence that we don't have. So what we don't have currently is things like agronomic sensors. So, for example, we don't know for sure, how much seed they applied on what acres and on what date. That's something that, you could imagine that you could add at a future date, via a data partnership.
And so who is using this in directory?
So in its current form, are the clients for such a product are other agriculture inputs companies, largely, who want to know. I mean, the biggest questions are for a marketing communications person. I want to reach X number of farmers who have these various characteristics. What do they look like, and how can I buy them? And so there's ultimately a set of kind of Marcom buying needs that we'll serve for this, and we're actually building in with Synaptiq. And there's also a sales use case, which is like, okay, I know that I have a territory in Northwest Iowa, and I know that I have these clients who are not my clients. Can you pull a list of people who are not my clients? So those are a couple simple use cases that this would solve for.
Awesome. That's really it's fantastic. So I guess what I'd like to talk about now is the process, right? So last year when you first started talking to Synaptiq, like what were the first steps you took in terms of sharing your ideas, how that unfolded? Just kind of unpack the process for me from like that moment when we partnered together, through to today in a nutshell, roughly.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been a little while now, so I'm probably going to forget some details. But we, started out with basically a day-long work session where we worked, basically kind of all the high-minded vision for this project. Brought in various people who actually touch our data on a day-to-day basis and operations roles. They wanted to kind of get an understanding of basically where we were strong or we didn't have where we had gaps ultimately in our data org structure. We talked through they actually kind of laid out some of the case studies of interesting relevant projects, so we kind of see how much we needed to expand our minds to some of the work that they were doing in other places. Ultimately, went to work on on an SOW. Actually, a lot of last year we worked through we were having Synaptiq just strictly work on kind of back end work on kind of setting the foundation for the ultimate build of the data lake project that we're getting close to finish now on with them. And we're working with another vendor for design and development of a front end. Ultimately, found that we preferred Synaptiq for also the design and front end development work, and then have been converting over to them. Synaptiq is now, as a result, not only building our data lake, but also now we'll be taking on our front end design and development work as we build out an activation suite and a sales suite.
So that's the UI UX aspect.
Yeah, the front end.
Yeah. We've got a pretty awesome team working on that, I know. So I'm glad that they're working hard on that for you. So what I'd like to, I remember when we spoke initially about this, you said something that I thought it was interesting and profound, right? And you mentioned it earlier. You said that there are not many other industries on such a steep curve to change as is agriculture, and how the age of big data, we have this, Farm Journal, have this opportunity to deliver data about the agriculture market to a diverse client base. And you mentioned that Synaptiq's helping you solve some of those necessary obstacles to providing that information in an affordable and elegant way. So I think I'd love to just have you talk about how you see Farm Journal participating in this transformation in your industry, because it's one of the things from our perspective at Synaptiq that just fires us up, right? This is why we love working with clients like Farm Journal, because we get to participate in some way in that transformation as well. And I think that's I'm just very attracted by what's going on in agriculture right now. So I'd just love to hear more from you about how you see Farm Journal's role in that transformation, because in some part that's also like, what Synaptiq is experiencing as well.
Yeah, well, so at a base level, I mean, there is sort of like this, what I just described to you, this kind of tool that allows you to search for farms that, kind of optimize to whatever it is that you're looking for as a client user. Building that as a SaaS product, as well as a means for us to sell advertising solutions and marketing solutions, would be a nice business model for us, because just doing that will, change with basically client needs, give them a much more advanced means of doing their business, allow us to not, find ourselves in the dinosaur position of being behind. So if that's all we do, that'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
But what I was starting to describe earlier and was I think kind of more the high-minded, big, hairy, audacious idea, and that is that I don't believe that Farm Journal is going to make hay as a company that actually creates data so much in terms of like, building sensor technologies, things like that. We're not a hardware company.
Right.
We're not even really a great core competency, better than everybody else data company. Mm-hmm. What we have in spades is we have this means of reaching digitally most farmers every day. Right. And that's kind of unparalleled in the industry. Mm-hmm. But nobody else can do that. And there's this world of all these little big data startups out there, right, that are like figuring out, and they're all like trying to do a very niche thing, like optimize irrigation or optimize your auger system,
right? And all that data from the IoT sensors too, right?
Yeah, and they're all trying to do very niche things. And so there's two problems that emerge from that. One is that they're all really small and they can't really get to statistical significance with their data, and so they need help they have a marketing problem. Mm-hmm. And so I've always sort of thought like, we probably more than anybody could connect those companies, mm-hmm, to the right audience and help some of them get to scale. Mm-hmm. And in return, our ask would be is that we have data rights. Mm-hmm. And then two, there's also sort of this even trickier challenge, which is the farmers will have, which is that if you want to be a big data farmer, if you want to develop a smart farm, you ultimately are going to need like 20 different systems right now, and no farmer has the capacity to sort of integrate all that stuff. So somebody's going to have to sort of solve for that.
So pardon the pun, but you're sort of a digital rainmaker.
Yes. And so I always sort of thought, I don't want to be, a lesson, my background way back was actually in newspapers. And the lesson from that background is you don't want to be like an individual publisher. You want to be the aggregator. Right. And Farm Journal and AgWeb actually have the potential to sort of be this aggregator. And so mm-hmm. the high-minded idea here is that, we become sort of a platform for ag intelligence. Right. We don't build the ag intelligence solutions, but we aggregate all that data. and deliver, insights that are unparalleled, because we are connecting data points that nobody else can, because everybody else is in their own little data fiefdoms. We're bringing it all together.
Wow. It'll be really interesting to see, and maybe we'll have to do like a I don't know, 2.0 version of this talk in a year or something. But the IoT aspect of this is so interesting, and I wonder what things will look like when those types of systems come online, so to speak, and are feeding information into your your platform. I think it'll be really interesting to see the kinds of evolutions that occur from there.
The stuff is always harder than the way you make it sound. I know that.
I know, it's true. It's a big challenge to, especially, I know, like normalizing data sets and getting them to all speak to each other and that kind of thing is part of the big challenge. So actually, it's a good segue for us, because I want to talk a little bit about, because your industry is so sector specific, but I think what you're doing relates to a lot of other industries and businesses, especially ones that have this information or in a position where they can like use it in different ways, whether that's internally or to build a product. So I want to talk a little bit about where you guys started, because this project that Synaptiq worked on with you was very much data engineering, right? And sometimes that's prerequisite for data science. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that progression, right? Data engineering, as it progresses to a point where your data scientists are using this platform, making sense of it, doing different things. And then, ultimately the implementation of like UI, UX, or using other types of AI and machine learning down the line. Can you talk a little bit about that evolution and where you started from, and why you particularly, Farm Journal, needed to start with data engineering before we could really, make inroads on anything else?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you don't have your, put it in simple terms, if you don't have your kind of data properly, if you don't have your data house in order, it's kind of hard to make a business of it. And so in our case, we had, for a variety of reasons, ultimately like 20 some different databases.
Mm-hmm.
And so the problem we had was we'd have a client come to us and say, hey, I need data on such and such. Provide me a profile report in this manner. So we'd pull it, or somebody would pull it for them, charge them a little bit of money, and then they'd come back and ask a question, maybe sometimes from like a different person within the company, and that person would attempt to pull the same data from a different database, and the client would be like, "What is going on here? Is your own data even right? Because I got two different reports from you that say two totally different things. What's wrong with you guys?" So anyway, we actually frequently embarrassed ourselves. And so I mean, obviously that's like a very simple story about like why, if you don't have like your basics right, then anything else, then if you go to them and you pitch them like, yeah, we have like these data scientists, we do really cool things, you're like, you can't even pull like the same data set consistently.
Right.
So why are you here talking to me about like data science or database management or anything like that? That's ridiculous. So that's a simple case. We did seriously though, we've tried to build a business, and we have successfully, around actually data science itself, where we go to clients and take like their sales data and sort of note to them like for example, we'll combine like their sales data with like our psychographic data, and then sort of note to them like, here are some opportunity groups that you could be targeting, and but at the end of the day, really what you're doing then is you're building a data business off of somebody else's data. And then you're not really building any asset value, because all your value is tied up in how good the people are you hired, instead of what should be your own asset. So I guess all that is to say, you have to make infrastructure investments to get anything else. So I want to have, for example, this beautiful data front end that I could sell as a SaaS product. If we didn't have like the back end, the data engineering done, the data lake built properly, then all my wanting was going to go nowhere. So I don't know what else to say. I don't know, to offer a few stories that basically to illustrate like the ways in which we failed either our client or to build asset value, because we didn't really prioritize data engineering as a competency within our company.
So I mean, just to be a little bit more specific, what would you tell a peer, if they were wondering how to determine their own data needs, whether they're starting from a data engineering perspective or they're further down the line, further down the process?
Well, I mean, I would tell them those stories and tell them, sort of the importance of, it's not sexy and it's sometimes hard to sell to executives, just the importance of that if you don't prioritize those things, you aren't going to be able to do you're not going to be able to build any of the things that actually have set value. And if you don't do those things, then you are strictly at best, providing, consulting services. So yeah, I mean, my advice would be just to sort of offer those stories of our own, failures, because that wasn't prioritized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I think this is one of the challenges just in when it comes to telling these stories, right? Every story is so unique, and a lot of the specificity around the project has to do very much with the individual team or company that's trying to solve a problem, right? So in the case of Farm Journal, you guys were delivering up this information and in part, right, just looking to eliminate redundancies. And it sounds like what you actually were able to do in the process of data engineering this data, what it was to build a product where the value is going to be so much far beyond that immediate need, right, of deduping things and normalizing your data sets.
Yeah, it's important. It's important to be able to show. I mean, the case you ultimately make, I guess maybe I haven't said this well enough, is a two-pronged case. One of it is what I've been saying, which is you can build, asset value for the company by way of, a SaaS product model or something like that. That's great. And also just raw serving your clients better, not looking like a fool. But you also, by way of this, also can eliminate some costs. I mean, we basically do like a lot of things manually today that in another world we won't do manually. And so instead of having a team that's dedicated of basically data production, querying, doing SQL queries to pull out, some kind of report, we can now instead focus those resources more on data acquisition, for example, which so instead of just sort of maintaining what we have today, we can actually be more in a growth mode.
So I think one of the things that I think that makes sense, and I think one of the things that would be helpful to share with the audience is a lot of what you described, it's a long journey, right? You had this idea, you worked it out, you talked about it with Stephen and with your colleagues, and ultimately started unpacking or unfolding the whole thing. It sounds like in somewhat small chunks, right? So that it was digestible at the within your company, and you were able to upsell it. But I think what would be helpful to understand is what do you do to make that leap from I have an idea, I think, but I'm not quite sure how to realize it, because I think when it comes to emerging tech and when it comes to AI and data engineering and some of this this stuff that it sounds great, it's buzzwords, but people have a hard time taking the first step and making it happen. What advice would you give to peers around getting out of that conversation mode and just kind of figuring out what's possible and what they might be able to accomplish?
I think two things. One, find a partner that actually can figure out whether or not it's technically viable, and for us, Synaptiq's been excellent at that. And then two, either find a partner or do it yourself, where you are going through a constant sort of agile process of develop a hypothesis, figure out break down sort of that vision you have into a series of ways that you can prove value. So what's the first fastest way you can prove value, and then build a hypothesis around that, or state it in the form of a hypothesis, and then figure out a quick way to test it. And so I guess if you're looking for a partner in that, I would just impress that it is important to find a partner who's really good with agile methodology.
And it sounds like we are.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, one of the pain points I have, being candid, is that I get too busy and kind of too focused on really high, sort of high level things of running a business, and don't put proper amount of time into thinking about how to sort of slice big ideas up into a series of smaller tests. And yes, I do think that the team at Synaptiq's been good at that, actually at a level of frequently saying to me, I mean, where Synaptiq is different, I think, versus others we considered, is you need to be clear about this going into it, is that they're not order takers. We actually have in various times, basically, this is what we want to build, please build it. And they've frequently pushed back and say, you don't know that, that's the right thing. We need to sort of do this, in kind of more of an agile process, and and so they've actually been good about kind of I guess managing up that discipline.
Yeah, I think I've heard our co-founder Dr. Tim Oates, who's works alongside Stephen as the co-founders of Synaptiq, and he's so honest with our clients when they have an idea. If the data is not there, or it's not possible, or we don't know, he's very quick to raise that, and he does it in a really wonderful way, because his background as a professor, and so it's always interesting to hear him engage on that level. So I'm just conscious of the time. We've been talking for just over 35 minutes, and I want to take a few questions from the audience. So I encourage everyone to pop them into the chat if they haven't. If you haven't already, I've got a couple here though that I want to make sure we get to before the end of this talk. So the first question here is from someone who says, my company has a team working on AI and data engineering. It sounds like their own, but it's within a different silo, and I can't leverage them for my project. Do you have advice on how to pitch working with an outside team?
So I'm assuming in this case, this is probably somebody who's needing to make a case to hire up to that we need to spend money on outsourcing this.
What it sounds like.
Yeah, and that's similar to what I faced with bringing on Synaptiq. So this project for Farm Journal is actually the largest CapEx project we've had in our history. So it is kind of a big deal. And I guess I would say the following things. The big thing here, obviously, here is you need to make a case and win that case. And I as I was saying earlier, I do think Stephen's very good about sort of helping me many times and sort of helping put together pitches. How to prove sort of market potential, and figure out ways, if you don't know that as well, to figure that out as affordably as possible. If you have a competitor in the market that's taking share, that was the case for us. That helps a lot, because you can basically point it over there and say, if we want that to continue to happen, then don't spend money. But otherwise, we need to make this investment. I would say, as much as possible, kind of utilize, either internally or, through somebody like Synaptiq, means of creating agile tests to prove value. I.e., interview people as much, pre-sell when you can. I mean, we're in the process right now of I'm kind of scratching my head on obviously coronavirus is going on, and people are scared internally about writing big checks, and so I've been kind of working with Stephen on maybe instead of building X, do we how might we pre-sell it, or how might we build a coalition of partners who need this thing, and go ahead and bring them in, and as partners, we're going to build this custom for them, but ultimately it's the beginning, it's the germ that we scale up into a bigger project. So I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, you need to, I guess the thing with Synaptiq for me has been that it's not, just like a shop. I mean, they really do help you a lot with, kind of thinking through how to make a business case.
Yeah, well, that's always great to hear. So can you just talk a little bit more about return on investment? Because you sort of touched on that in the way you answered that question, but I think that's a big one, right? When you're trying to demonstrate to higher ups and sell your idea for spending money, how are you actually demonstrating return on investment?
Well, I mean, it's obviously a two-sided equation. One is a reasonable path to revenue, and obviously the absolute safest is to try to pre-sell or partner with a series of clients, and then the other is ultimately cost savings. And if you know that certain if you're in a partnership with Synaptiq or somebody that kind of helps you with reimagining your data production processes or building things that ultimately utilize AI and machine learning so that you are automating away processes. I mean, those are inarguable cost savings that are going to be coming. You're not reliant on a customer signing a check. You know that you're going to get a cost savings.
Yeah.
And so, I guess in the end, with my case, I'm playing both those sides. I mean, there are real cost savings that we can attain by making the changes that we're making, and there's also a future market we're hoping to tap, and we have a competitor that has taken our share. We want to take that back from.
So I think this will probably be the last question. The question is, what would you have done without Synaptiq? Like, could you have done this internally?
Not easily, no. We would have tried to hire essentially a CTO for this project, and my guess is that internally we would have sort of, amongst the group of us, we would have known probably about 70% of what we really needed for that. For that hire, and then that person may or may not have worked out, and then we would have, and then who knows what would have happened from there. Another thing where I've been appreciative of Synaptiq of is I've also been, very honest with Stephen, and that, we are wanting to develop this capability that Synaptiq currently serves for us, and so. He's been helpful in helping us, sort of vision out, how we might actually build some of that team internally, and transition the nature of our relationship with Synaptiq. So, we end up sort of taking on more ongoing data operations, and they're working on our bleeding edge or whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, the short answer to your question is that there's a decent chance it would have gone well, or there's a chance that we could have gotten lucky.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I've been talking to a lot of clients, and it seems like a lot of people are in a similar situation.
I just realized there's a lot that I didn't know going into it. And even though I've spent a decent chunk of my career doing these things, I mean, there always is an advantage, with working with a partner who's seen a lot of different things, and that has knowledge of various pitfalls that you may be blind to because of your own limited experience.
Yeah. Well, I think we should wrap up. We're at 45 minutes almost. So thank you. This was really interesting. I always enjoy talking to you, and I'm hoping that this was valuable to your peers and our audience. I want to just reiterate for everybody that this is actually our first Bright Talk. Synaptiq will be doing more. We've got one coming up on April 7th. Dr. Tim Oates and some data scientists on our team decided to just dig into some of that open source COVID data. So they'll be looking into that over the next couple of weeks. And then Tim is going to do a presentation on what we learned on April 7th. So we hope you'll join us for that. And that'll be a little bit more technical. This talk was meant to be more from a business perspective. A lot of folks that we talked to are in a similar place to where you were last year, Gray, where they're embarking on something or they have an idea. And we're hoping that these kinds of talks will spark ideas, spark innovation, encourage conversation. We know everyone's kind of wondering what things are going to be like in a few weeks when hopefully all this coronavirus stuff settles and we go back to life in a more normal way. But again, this was meant to be sort of an inspirational and business level talk. And we will have a couple more of these coming in April and May with other clients. So I will send out notices to you all about that, and hopefully you can join us. And in closing, I did not formally introduce Synaptiq, but I just want to make sure everybody who's watching knows who we are. We were founded in 2017. We're a full-scale artificial intelligence consultancy. We've got an incredible bench of data scientists and data engineers, and as Gray mentioned, UI UX experts as well. So depending on the project, we definitely can meet your needs in a variety of different ways. And we've worked with over 40 clients to date since 2017. So we've covered a lot of territory. This talk today was on the agriculture industry and media, but we're going to be talking to the CIO from a law firm in a couple weeks and the CEO of a tech startup in the financial services sector. So we've got a lot of really good talks coming up. I hope you'll join us. And that is it for today. So everybody stay healthy, stay safe, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, Gray.
Thank you.